Open Tobias Harris, and Tobias drills it! Sixers up one!
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane!
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. My name is Sean Barnard, here with my guy James Birrane. It has been a little bit, and the spirits have certainly picked up in the Sixers world. So excited to dive into the latest with Joel Embiid, how he's looked, talk about some other injury factors on this team, and a little bit of seeding aspect before they go into what very well could be one of the more important games of the entire season. So before we dive fully into it, James, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing real good. I didn't expect to be feeling this good coming into this portion of the season, but I think somebody said the other day, the stars are starting to feel like they're aligning. So it's always good to have good vibes and a good win streak going in the playoffs. And Sixers are doing it for us right now. So I feel pretty strong.
Absolutely. And the last time we had spoken, Joel Embiid had still remained out from injury, that he has been battling these injuries for quite some time. He now has 4 games on his belt since returning from the meniscus tear, the surgery, all those things. What are your initial reactions to how he's looked, how he's moving, your feelings on him back on the floor, and really just the fact that we are able to see this guy play basketball again?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is he's there. Like the impact that he has just being there is, it's everything. So the defense, I think, takes the biggest automatic leap, even with him being kind of like settling in and getting his footing underneath him. The defense, the rim protection, the ability for the guards and wings to press out beyond the 3-point line has changed a lot for them. I think they've contested a lot better just in general. So the defense has taken a huge step in the right direction. Naturally, we talk about all the time how underrated he is as a defender. And then offensively, like he's not going as strong. I think like he would do those like straight line drive, like off the catch right to the rim. He's been avoiding that a little bit. I think that's probably intentional. But the jumper looks like it's starting to settle in. The first couple of games was just like, get out there. He looked tired. So it's good for him to get these, what is it? He's played 4 games. We'll get probably 6, 7 or 5, 6 underneath his belt before the playoffs. So getting ready, getting his lungs back, his legs back. The 3-point shot, I think, is what I'm most surprised by. That is 9 of them.
9 against the Pistons the other night.
And when he made 4?
Yeah, 4 for 9.
Those are shooters' numbers, babies. That's a great night outside the 3-point line. So I'd love to see it from him if he can add that to the bag, and then once it comes down to it, I'm sure he'll get back to the basket and doing that stuff. But the passing, the shooting, and the defense is what jumps off the page initially from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the 3-point thing, I think, is a great point. This is something that I personally have been asking for years, and I think a lot of people have been on the same page, is that he does need to make more of a focus of a perimeter-oriented game. Just having that threat opens up everything. And he's a guy who's very clearly good enough as a shooter. The mid-range is straight up automatic, and he's been efficient enough from beyond the 3-point arc throughout his career. I love the idea of him just spacing the floor, and we're seeing it in different opportunities. Like he hit a corner 3 on like a pin down that Buddy Hield sent on kind of an out of bounds play. That's something that I don't think we've ever really seen from Joel, at least very not common whatsoever. And beyond that, like, I guess for starters, the 3-point stuff, my personal opinion is this is all a good thing. This is him expanding his game. This is something that there's more value in the 3-point shot. Obviously, that's why the NBA is kind of shifting in the way that it has, and he's good enough to take those steps along with the rest of the league. If you do want to look at it pessimistically, maybe it's him not quite trusting his body enough or attacking the same way that he does throughout. I think it's fair to assess he's not quite at 100% yet. But what I've been most impressed with is he is moving pretty well. He does look springy. He looks slim. He looks like he did not allow himself to fall out of shape too much as far as putting on weight. Obviously, you got to play yourself into basketball pace, that no matter how much you're on the exercise bike or how much you're running on the zero gravity treadmill, you can't quite replicate the intensity of an NBA game. And we're seeing him try to catch up to those steps right here. But if I had to ask you kind of the percentage you believe he's at right now, based on the peak Joel Embiid MVP at 100%, where would you put that?
Probably like 80, I think, at this point is probably a fair point. I think like it's him not being fully in shape, like game shape yet. I do also think it's another like he has modes, right? Like he has modes where it's like I'm going to be all out no matter what. And I think if it were a case where it's like if the playoffs started tomorrow, I think Joel would be out there and he would look totally normal. I think at this point it's him protecting himself. It's the team letting him know that he needs to protect himself, and it just like get into a rhythm before he starts going, balls to the wall, which is a good sign from him and the training staff, and the coaching staff. But even like against the Pistons the other night, and they were kind of beating up on them pretty good, as the Pistons are pretty bad. And he still ended up out there, through the majority of the fourth quarter, because they just needed to get him to 30 minutes. They needed to get him to play 30, 34 minutes. So just so we can get those lungs back. So I do think the reason he doesn't look 100% right now is probably because he's not up to look at that level yet. I think if it came down to it, he probably would seem totally fine. But as of right now, it seems like he's maybe not necessarily like holding back, but reserving himself of putting himself in any bad positions.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. I think I would go a little bit lower on the number than you. I'd probably put him closer to probably 70%, which again, I'll take that for now. That like the fact that he's on the court at all is a great sign. And I do think most of it is just fitness, getting up to speed, getting up to game speed, playing off the reps to shake off the rust. Like there hasn't been anything super noticeable from the injury standpoint, which is the biggest thing. I did want to pull up this one video here, as we did have a little bit of a scare in this Pistons game, and shout out to Jacob Moreno for tweeting this out here. But we did see his knee buckle a little bit on this play here. Never want to see anything like this. He's just flat, grab it down, and watch that one more time here. He stayed in that game. He was able to play, as you mentioned, 36 minutes, which is the most since he's come back from injury. That was a bit of a frightful moment for me, that I was afraid when that was the case. But we're also seeing that he played through it. He is listed as questionable ahead of the matchup with the Magic tomorrow. That's obviously kind of an all-hands-on-deck matchup. Any concern as far as the injury side of things? Like, I know there's a lot of speculation for him rushing back and those type of conversations. Anything from the injury side of things?
Nope. I'm not going to give into it. I feel like people obviously it's like you hold your breath in moments like that. And, he lets out that like shriek that he does, which is always like, and once you figure out he's fine, it's kind of comical. But like he got up, he went right to the bench, he sat down. Like I think he's a little bit dramatic at times. I think we can all kind of agree with that. I literally said, I was like, at first I was like, oh shit, when I saw it, and then I saw him get up, I was like, he's fine. When Embiid when he's hurt, like we know when he's hurt. So I saw that. I feel like it doesn't need a reaction. I don't think he ended up playing that was you say it was in the third quarter. Yeah. How many did he play after that though? Like he stayed in and then continued to play and then went out and then came back. Like he played a pretty normal second half. I want to say that was in the third quarter or something. So it was like he still ended up playing a completely full game and was totally fine. So I have at this point, no worries. And again, the surgery was not like reconstructive in a way that other things have been for him. So I feel totally fine right now. I'm going to kind of stay right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love all that. And as you mentioned, like this is something that essentially the brace just did its job there, that it did hold up on a little bit of an awkward moment, maybe get those Skechers laced up a little tighter or a little extra grip on those bad boys or something along those lines. But maybe you can have those talks with the manufacturers this offseason. There's obviously debuting the new shoe there. There are also a couple other injury updates with the Sixers team. We finally saw D'Anthony Melton back on the court. Felt like it's been forever because it kind of has been. And we know the story with him with the back is this is something that has been an issue with him throughout his career, that he's had back issues dating back to his time with the Memphis Grizzlies back in the 2018-19 season. He had some back injuries last year with the Sixers team. And then he had an issue this year, the lumbar situation, lumbar fracture, something like that. It's a lumbar issue. Then he returned for 2 games and re-injured it, had to be out for an extended period of time. I thought the book was essentially closed on him returning this year, but very nice to have him back on the court and very glad that his body seems to be responding fine. So thoughts on Melton?
Love to have him back, dude. You kind of like, not that we forgot about him, obviously, but like with the guard rotation that they currently have, he like kind of like got lost in the shuffle because he wasn't playing. But then he gets in there and it's just like to have another guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything, can attack the rim, can rebound, obviously defends at a high level. And then just another floor spacer. Like, and he at the beginning of the year, like he was firing. You know what I mean? Like he was shooting really, really well. And he had nights where he was, drilling 5-6 threes. And that's such a huge difference maker in, especially with this team. And you look at their guard rotation now, and like between obviously Maxey, Lowry, Hield, Melton, and you mix Oubre kind of into that as well. It's like they look a lot deeper now. Like every time you add a new guy into this and a new facet, and they're very, very versatile. They can go a kind of a defensive mode. They can kind of go straight offensive mode, and Melton can fit into any of those lineups. So, yeah, I've really liked having him back, and he looked bouncy, he looked springy, he looked healthy, which was all like really positive. And like you said, I didn't expect to get him back. I kind of thought that his season was over. So it was really nice to see him back, and happy for him to be able to be back out there and playing again.
Yeah, totally agree. And he's another guy who looked himself, that you saw a little springiness, little athleticism, which is obviously a big part of the way that he plays and just him as a basketball player. And I do think it's being undersold how impactful that is for this Sixers team, that this is a guy who he's Mr. Do Everything, that he can do a little bit of it all. And the Sixers don't have a lot of players like that. Turned himself into a very good three-point shooter and very quick release three-point shooter, which is always a big deal surrounding Joel Embiid with. He can put the ball on the floor. He can play make a little bit, and a very good defender as well. I think especially in these Nick Nurse systems where there's so much switching and rotating, that's D'Anthony Melton, that he's capable of getting his hands in passing lanes. He's able to rotate. He's able to guard guys bigger than him, which is going to be necessary throughout this playoff stretch. So definitely got to continue playing him back into his full self. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well in that game, and definitely has some things to still work on. But like the bottom line is he's here. We know who he can be, and I do think that is great news for the Sixers team. They got sneaky deep real quick, which is an awesome thing.
Absolutely, I fully agree. And for him, like to even just like graze over some of the matchups, that would be super important to have him back. Like he could, you assign him to Brunson, you assign him to Damian Lillard, you assign him to Chris Middleton and something like that. You assign him to DiVincenzo. Like you look at some of these guys, and some of the guys that you're going to be facing in a playoff series potentially. You could put him on Jimmy Butler. You could put him on Tyler Hero. You could put him on Haywood Highsmith. I'm just going down a rabbit hole now, but you know what I mean? Like he's, obviously Maxey has taken a real step up on the defensive end of the floor, and Lowry is always going to be Lowry, but Melton's a legit real deal defender, all around the perimeter. And we saw him have a couple of steals like in a zone, and it'll just be really nice to have him. And him and Maxey play really well together. And, on the fast break, obviously he's another guy that can get up and down and then space the floor. So you can't have enough of those guys.
Yeah, totally agree on all fronts there. And the guy that I think I'm most disappointed that we haven't had any positive news on, other than Kate mentioning on the broadcast that he should be back in the next couple of games, although there's 2 games left in the regular season, so I'm not overly optimistic. But Robert Covington, man, I was so hyped this guy was coming back to the Sixers, that we all remember the fond memories of the process days. And he is a guy whose current skill set I think would be very effective on the Sixers team. In the same way with you projecting potential matchups, like Covington would be the number one guy I would pick for a Jason Tatum matchup, or a guy like that perimeter wing type archetype of player. But it's unfortunate. I just don't think that's going to be the case. So do you have any optimism of Covington returning to this team, or do you think it's time to close the book on that one?
I mean, it's kind of weird that like a couple of days ago they were reporting that he was going to be back soon, and then today it was reported that he couldn't do anything at practice. So for his sake, I mean, it's tough because it's like he doesn't have that many seasons left. Like he's not a spring chicken anymore. So to lose a vast majority of this year, it's been a long time since he's played.
December 30th.
Yeah. Oh,
yikes.
It's April 11th. Yeah, that's a long time. So it sucks for him to miss that much time for, obviously the team's sake, but for himself as well. He's on, the last year of a contract. So it kind of sucks to see that happen for him. And he would be like another thing. He was never really a Nick Nurse guy.
True.
So like, I don't know what his role was going to be at this point anyway. Not to say it would have been nothing, but I don't know if it would have been a massive role to begin with. But again, it's always nice to have those guys that can plug and play. And he was a guy that's had playoff experience and has played, for over a decade at this point. So it's like you could put him into a game, he could play defense and hit an open shot. And just another guy, like when you look at this team, there's a lot of guys that can just kind of do a little bit of everything. And he was just another one of those guys. So it sucks for him. It sucks for us for him to not be available. But, maybe he comes back final game of the year, gets some burn, and then, goes into the playoffs feeling kind of fresh.
Yeah, would absolutely love for that to be the case. And even like if that is, like he's not going to be a guy that returns and they need him to play 30 minutes. He's kind of going to be a change up factor off the bench that if he's available can still make an impact. Like it is one of those, just go chase that guy around for a couple minutes. Go be the primary defender of that. So I do hope that is the case. It's very clear the Sixers are making every effort, and Covington himself seems to be making every effort. That I think if I think in a lot of situations that he barely would have been ruled out for the year already based on what we know and kind of the circumstances. It's also bizarre bone bruise is still being labeled as the official injury. It's a long time for a bone bruise. I don't know what's going on or what more to the story there is than that. We know how the Sixers are with injury reports in general and the way, they've literally been fined twice this year for failure to report twice on the injury report. So who knows what the full situation is, but I do hope that he is back on the floor. And you mentioned him kind of losing a lot of money because of him not being able to suit up during the stretch. I did want to shift over to someone who's made himself a pretty penny this year. Kelly Oubre Jr., man. I absolutely love having him on the Sixers team. The flexes, the winks, the blowing kisses at opponents' benches, the way that he attacks the rim so relentlessly, the athleticism that he brings. I love having him on this team. Kelly has now become not just a guy that is like a potential, cake guy that can step up in certain games. He's a real part of this Sixers team and a guy that we've seen how good the starting lineup looks with him in it, with the special someone not being in the starting lineup for the Sixers team. I think he needs to outplay Tobias Harris in terms of minutes come playoff time, and I think everything about his skill set screams that. Your thoughts on Kelly Oubre Jr.?
Yeah, dude, I'm surprised at how much I've enjoyed his game. I knew like at the beginning, like I was like, I'm gonna like him, but he's gonna be frustrating. And honestly, I haven't felt a lot of frustration with him. It's been the moments where he's done too much has been the moments where Tyrese and Joel aren't even on the court. And it's like, you're asking him you're putting a lot more on his plate. So you can't fault him for taking bad shots. He's been way better defensively than I had anticipated. Like worlds better. Yeah. Like, and that's all you can ask. And he's a guy, he's 6'8". He's athletic. He's strong. He's quick. He's like, honestly, a high basketball IQ kind of guy. Like he knows where to be.
All right. We'll settle on a high basketball IQ, but yeah.
In a way where it's like in aggressiveness, I should say, like he's willing to go out of his way to make plays. And that goes a long way for a guy that has the athletic skill set that he does on the fast break. Like he's a guy where like things break down. Kelly Oubre is there to get to the rim. He puts his head down. He's going to go left. He's going to find a way to get a shot up, whether it's a little jumper, little floater kind of thing that he does. He's going to try to dunk on somebody. He's missed a few too many for my liking just because I want to see him put them down. But I've really enjoyed him as he continues to start hitting more shots now. Like the jumper seems to be like kind of coming back to form. It was lost for a bit there, like really lost for a bit there. But when it comes back to form, man, he's a guy that like you kind of need to have on the floor. He makes shit happen like all the time. And he's lengthy. He can switch. He can defend the rim. He made a huge block at the rim the other night.
3 blocks the other night. 3 blocks.
Yeah. And passing numbers have been up as well. So I've been really, really happy with him. And I think that he is an integral part in a way that like I did not expect him to be.
Yeah, he's got a higher assist percentage this year than he's had over any other year in his career by like a pretty significant margin. I forget what his exact numbers offhand, but it blows away anything that he's previously done. I do think that a lot of this has been like Kelly in a lot of situations has more or less been asked to play above the role that he can be successful in. That he has the talent. Like he's very clearly like a very talented basketball player. The IQ has always been like a bit of a question with him, that he will take the dumb heat check shots or an unnecessary step back or create when he probably should defer to others. I think that this Sixers team, the way it's constructed, is pretty perfect for him as far as like there are nights where they need you to go step up and attempt 20 shots, but there's also nights where you just need to catch lobs, attack the rim, and get downhill. And I also think something kind of clicked in his head this year where there's moments where he's like, wait a minute, I'm the most athletic guy on this floor right now. Like, let me just attack the rim and see what happens. And that's been working for him very well. And totally agree on the defensive side of the ball as well, that I've been blown away with how hard he competes on that side of the floor, how much he seems to take it personal, which I love in a defender and in a basketball player in general. When you look at a guy as a matchup and it's like, I'm not letting that guy beat me. I see that in Kelly on the floor, and that's great to see. So yeah, he's become an integral part of this team. He absolutely is going to get cashed out for a pretty significant contract, whether it is in Philadelphia or somewhere else next year. But I do hope this guy is in for the long haul. But I guess the playoffs will kind of decide how that shakes out in the market beyond that. And I did kind of want to touch on the playoffs here. I know this is kind of the overarching conversation of all this. Just to dive into the standings as a whole, and I'll begin by just pulling these up here. So the Celtics have essentially run away with things, and it's been that way for quite some time now. About a 13.5 game lead for the first place. That is massive. That is very significant in terms of that. Then everybody else is pretty tight knit. The Milwaukee Bucks sitting in that 2 seed, the New York Knicks at 3, the Cavs at 4, Magic at 5, Pacers at 6, The Sixers down at 7 right now, and the Heat at 8. But just look at how narrow that difference is. That the Sixers 17.5 games back versus the Bucks 13.5 games back for that 2 seed. So it's just a 4-game difference there. And if you want to look at the 3 seed, that's just 2.5 games, I believe, is the quick math there. So pretty tight knit race, and still a lot to be decided with the final 2 games to play. Is there anything? And I've gotten so lost trying to figure out all the tiebreakers and everything. My quick note that I will throw in here, what I think a lot of the confusion is, and personally I fell victim to this, is so if it's a direct head-to-head matchup for a tiebreaker, or for 2 teams as a tiebreaker, that the head-to-head matchups is the number 1 tiebreaker. If it expands to 3 teams being tied with the same record, then it defers to divisional record. So for the Sixers specifically, in an example here, with the Miami Heat and Orlando Magic, the Sixers have the direct tiebreaker over both those teams because of head-to-head matchups, and that's even regardless of what happens tomorrow with the Magic, as they're 2-0 against them this year. But if it were a 3-way tie, then both those teams would hop ahead of the Sixers because of the divisional record. Very confusing, and there's a lot of complications. But I guess in the more broader question, how much are you watching the seeds? How important do you think it is at this stage, James?
It's gotten to be a lot over the last 3-4 days, paying attention and, watching the Heat lose and watching the Pacers, or I'm sorry, the Magic lose again last night to the Bucks, and obviously rooting for the Sixers game in and game out, and they're, winning a lot of these games to put them back into a good position. So I'm paying attention because it's nice to check the matchups and what potentially could be out there. It is exhausting because there's literally nothing you can do, and a lot of it is out of the Sixers' control. If they take care of business, they still could end up just as the 7 seed. So I think I'm kind of settling into just expecting to be in the 7, expecting to play in that playing game, and then kind of go from there. If they are in a spot where they get up to that 6, or I guess they could technically get to the 5 if things fall a certain way, not to open up that can of worms, but if they end up out of the play-in, great. I love that. I love not having to play that game. I love not having to worry about it at all. Get a little additional rest for some of these guys that are coming back from injury. So I'm paying attention. I'm keen to it, to put it that way, but it's not something where I'm like, they need to, get this win from whomever, or they need to get this loss from whomever to make sure that they get out of the play. And if they have to play a 1-game thing against the Heat, at this point, you got to turn and say, bring it on. I'm not trying to avoid anything.
Yeah, and assuming that they take care of business, win these final 2, at the worst, they're closing the season on an 8-game winning streak and having all the momentum in the world on their side with the MVP back in fold. But I'm a little more optimistic than you, that I think that I'm not closing the door on that 6 seed. And frankly, I would love to get there. I have heard out these arguments about, wanting to face the Bucks and Celtics when you're at your healthiest and that side of things. And I do hear that. I personally think the Bucks are going to self-destruct regardless of if the Sixers face them or not. That I think if it's that Miami team, they're going to pick them apart. I think just about whoever. And obviously the Giannis injury just throws another factor in here. To be honest, think this should fall under just the excuse handed to Doc Rivers, that I think even if that team was fully healthy, I just don't see them winning a 7-game series really against any of these potential matchups. They've looked that bad to me lately. But we'll see how that all shakes out. I definitely would have no problem if that is the 7 seed matchup between the Bucks and the Sixers. I've mentioned quite a bit. Yeah, it feels like fate. It feels like it is destined to happen, that it would be that revenge tour, that we know the Doc Rivers history, even the Pat Bev trade and everything else that you can kind of throw in the mix there. But I don't think any team in this Eastern Conference really scares me except for the Celtics. And that's really what this race has exposed to me, that you look down the list of each of these teams and you can find flaws. And don't get me wrong, these Sixers are not perfect, but I truly feel that as each team is currently constructed, the Sixers are the second most dangerous team in the East. Would you agree with that?
100%. We've been saying it for a while. I've been in private sectors. I've been much more confident in this, and I'll probably continue to maintain my confidence in those private sectors. On here, I'll be a little bit more realistic in saying, dude, top to bottom, this team is damn good. They've got guys all over the place that do a bunch of different stuff. By far the deepest team that they've had in this Embiid era. Maxey is at the point where he's legitimately an all NBA guard. You have guys like Kelly Oubre who have stepped up, and obviously Tobias is going to do what he's going to do. But you have guys that can get hot. You have Buddy Hield who can shoot you into a win. He needs to figure it out.
Yeah, hasn't been doing a lot of that lately, but
he can. We know that he can. Proven track record, right? And even if you get down to the nitty gritty of it, you've got Batum, who obviously we love. And there's just, you go down the list, there's just guy after guy after guy who, like, you look coming off the bench, you're like, he would have been the best player off the bench in that year. He would have been the best player off the bench in that other year. He would have been the best player off the bench. I mean, you just have the pieces right now. And if Embiid is fully healthy, getting in back to his peak form for the playoffs, I don't see a team that beats them. And I obviously, things have gone very badly in previous years. But as Nick Nurse said at the beginning of the year, I do not vibrate with the frequencies of the past, so I'm not concerned about it. Obviously, I would like to avoid playing the Celtics in round one.
Yes.
But I didn't like what you said there. I didn't like what you said. You said you're maybe a little scared of the Celtics. Maybe that's the only team that scares you. I'm not scared of anybody. Okay. I like to have that mentality of like, they got to go in there, dude. Whoever they got to play, you got to beat them. If you want to get to a championship, you got to beat the best teams in the league.
Yeah, I like the way you say that. And we've done this dance where you're looking at seedings before and it still results in the second round exit. That we've seen them just, make sure you get that top seed. So you just get to cruise through the Atlanta Hawks in the second round. And then all of a sudden, Ben Simmons is pump faking from 2 feet away from the basket. And we're having these same exact conversations. Yeah. But I do think like the bigger deal and the bigger conversation, it is internally. It is about this Sixers team, the way that they're playing, the things they do bring to the table. And I do want to dive into a little bit of their playoff rotation. The last note that I will say real quick, I have heard out the argument of playing the Celtics in the first round. I think I did just mention that, how would you feel about it if it did shake out that was the 1 and 8 seed? And there is a world where that happens. Say the Sixers are the 7th seed in the play-in. That's a one and done game. And yes, I do feel very good about this Sixers team right now, but anything can happen in a 1-game setting, especially if it, as it looks, will be against the Miami Heat. That could very well happen. So what would your feelings be if that were the case?
It would take years off my life, if I'm being completely honest with you. And like, again, I would welcome it in a way that like I would mold my mind to just like take in the fact that like, all right, this is the best team in the East. If you beat this team, you can beat anybody. You know what I mean? Like they're arguably the best team in the league as constructed. Like if you can beat them, you can beat anybody. So like it would be tough to do that right away. This team has not played a lot together, so I would love to get a round or two in where they can get some cohesion, build some chemistry back before this happens. But like, if it happens, it happens. You got to do what you got to do, and if they could go into a matchup with them, take them down early like that, it would be like the biggest momentum builder imaginable to take them down. So not an ideal situation, I would say, is the way I would put it. But, whatever happens, happens. Like you said, I don't want to like watch the standings and pray for, a certain thing to fall a certain way, because then you end up playing the Hawks in round 2 and it doesn't matter anyway. So, that's just, I try not to worry too much. I would like to avoid them, but, whatever happens, whatever the basketball gods want,
That would be the most Sixers ending to the season if they beat the Celtics round 1 and then lose to like the Knicks in round 2. Too. That would be just absolutely crushing there.
Round 2.
Yeah, that'd be tough. That would be tough. But I do, as I mentioned, I think the bigger story is internally here. So I want to take a little look at the depth chart here and kind of talk through the playoff rotation. We've mentioned how deep this team is, far deeper than years past, and I just want to get your thoughts on who exactly makes the cut. That we know kind of traditionally teams tend to drop into usually around an 8-man rotation for playoffs. I don't really know how this cuts out for the Sixers team. So I guess to start off is the locks. It is that starting unit that you can see Maxey. The Lowry Melton stuff's going to be interesting. I'm going to guess that Lowry kind of holds down the fort as the secondary guard, mostly due to the injury side of things and, Melton not having his full legs under him. Do you agree that will be the case?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Lowry, and wait, you think so? You think Lowry's going to start at the 2?
That would be my guess. Yes. And I mean, you can flex that and say he's the 1, Maxey's the 2. I think those would be the backcourt.
Yeah. I could see that happening. I was actually going to say the opposite. I thought that like Melton was going to slide into the starting lineup and like because they rotate Maxey out first. So like Lowry could come in 6-man and like you want to make sure that he's on the court almost exclusively with Joel. Like I think that they want to mirror those minutes pretty closely. Yeah. While I do love Lowry with Maxey, I think that like overlapping his minutes with like the Embiid on, Maxey off, and then like the last part of the Maxey coming back on and Embiid coming off. I can see it either way. And you know what? I think the best part about that is like I would like it either way.
Yeah, a couple notes there. I have noticed it seems pretty intentional from Nick Nurse pairing the Lowry and Embiid minutes. I
Yeah.
think specifically when he first came back, when there was no Maxey for that game, that was literally every single minute that Embiid played that Lowry was sharing the floor with them.
Mhm.
Obviously, some of that with no Maxey, you want him out there with a true point guard. I also kind of really like the look of Tyrese Maxey playing off ball with Kyle Lowry, and we've spoken about this a ton. That was a great deal. The appeal of having James Harden on this team is you do kind of get the best of both worlds with Maxey, that he can step up, run the offense for a play here and there, but he's also so good as a catch and shooter and so dynamic as an off-ball mover that I do see the value in having him as that. So I think I'm kind of pushing that way, but I am surprised to see you say that Melton would be thrown back in the lineup that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just more about you look at a series and like Melton is probably going to play more minutes in a series than Lowry, and you probably want to assign him that, best guard defensive matchup. And not that Lowry couldn't do that, but like to tax him that much and that early, I think is probably something that they want to avoid, I would imagine. So that's
Yeah.
like kind of where I'm coming from with it.
That's fair. And real quick, Lowry, by the way, has held up very well defensively, far better than I expected. The Jimmy Butler matchup stands out to me a ton, that he was locking Jimmy Butler down. Butler was trying to take him to the post and very much has the size advantage there. And Lowry was digging in with those, famous fat bottom digging in, not giving any space. And yeah,
Yeah,
I was very impressed with the way that he's holding up.
I
So
love him.
yeah, absolutely. So kind of the two other locks. Number one, Joel Embiid, of course. Number two, Tobias Harris. What does this team do with Tobias Harris, James?
So they're not. He's not going to not start. Let's start there. I know I've seen some stuff. He's not going to not start. I think the
Although
biggest
six-man Toby would be dangerous, but I don't see that.
Dude, bringing in an assassin scorer off the bench like that, not a lot of teams have that luxury. Yeah, I think the bigger part of it is like he can't be an automatic 30, 35-minute guy. Like you just have too many wings. You have too many guys that can play, and he can't be an automatic closer. I think is the bigger portion of all of this is like you need to go with who's hot. You need to go with who's playing well in that game. Like if Tobias is doing some like bullshit Tobias stuff, like somebody else has got to be in there. Batum, Oubre, Melton have to be in there. We've seen 3-guard lineups where they go Maxey, Lowry, Melton, which like I don't know if I love that, but like it's possible. And I think Nurse has shown the wherewithal to do that. I think that's definitely in his repertoire to like not have Tobias be in closing lineups. But I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is like he's gonna start. He's probably gonna play minimum of like 26 minutes, if we're being honest. I would love to see it be like stay around there or lower if, Oubre is playing really well or Batum is playing really well, because I think like late game moments, I want Oubre and Batum out there more than I want Tobias, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And this is where Nurse is going to have to put his stones on the table here, that like there's no more caring about feelings, that Tobias Harris is a free agent this summer, that he has spent far too many seasons, far too many games already in a Sixers uniform, that you make these decisions based on what is best for this current team. And by the way, all those guys that you just mentioned, D'Anthony Melton, Kelly Oubre, Nico Batum, their skill sets are all more complementary of the team's two main stars than Tobias Harris. So I think I would really pretty much zero in on staggering him and playing him with the bench unit where he can, get to his spots and the Sixers can survive that, where he can get his touches, his little post ups and the things that he likes to do. The bottom line is we know who Tobias Harris is at this point. He has had stretches where he's looked mostly fine in the playoffs. He's had, some more decisive catch and shoot opportunities, things like that. But we've also seen the bad side of him on the playoffs. He is who he is at this point. But I agree with you that I don't think there's any legitimacy to him actually going to the bench. The more interesting conversation, I think, is for that fifth starter. So I think it really comes down to Kelly Oubre and Nico Batum is the conversation here. I think you could kind of talk yourself into Melton maybe being in the discussion if you want to go super small with the Maxey, Lowry, Melton. But I really think it does come down to Batum or Oubre. So what's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think in a similar way as Lowry, like I want Batum out there when Embiid is out there.
Totally.
I think that just makes more sense. Like I think Batum is optimized in lineups with Joel. He's a great passer to the post. He's just super smart in his cuts. He does like that Danny Green cut, similarly to how he used to do that. It finds space. He makes sure there's never stagnant. Like it's very often later in the shot clock where like Batum just finds a spot to get open and then gets a shot up. I like that with Joel better than I like Oubre. And like Oubre, I think is kind of to me, Oubre is an anytime, anywhere kind of player. Like you put him on the court, he's going to get a bucket anytime, anywhere. It doesn't matter who's guarding him, who else is on the court with him. Obviously, we've seen him, have a lot more success with the starters and everything. And I think that he should be playing at I think if there was like a guy that's playing the most wing minutes, it should be Kelly. So I think that like coming off the bench doesn't mean that he's getting like bench minutes. I think he should probably be getting starters minutes, but like the insertion, like the influx of energy with Kelly coming off the bench, like sixth man, like that energy and that like momentum that he can build immediately off the bench is like, I think very valuable, especially in a playoff setting. And then he can play, 25 minutes a night as that guy. But just like coming off the bench first, I think makes more sense than bringing Batum in, who's kind of like more of a steady pace.
Yeah, with you all around here. And quick note, that entry pass from Nico Batum to Maxey against the Spurs, might be the greatest entry pass that I've ever seen. The touch on that, the feel, he may very well be like the best entry passer that I've ever seen. And I know that's been like a skill set that like we've been frustrated about the lack of just getting capable guys in that category for the Sixers team. But he's so smart with the basketball and has such a good feel for that. Even that pass, like also in double overtime or at the end of the first overtime to Oubre in the corner, that's a difficult pass. And he makes it look so easy. So I'm totally with you that I think you pair his minutes with Joel as much as possible. I would even say I think that's more important with Batum than it is with Lowry, that I see the appeal of Lowry without Joel on the floor. I don't see it as much with Batum, that he's got it like for many stretches of this Joel-less period look pretty bad out there. And like we've seen how great he is as a pairing, but to me, like that should all be kept in the back of your mind of make sure these guys are playing together, make sure they're maximizing each other. And I also agree with you that Oubre is the type of guy who comes in and changes the game. As much as I am a pro Nico Batum guy, he doesn't quite have that same impact on the game the second he steps in. He just stays in his lane. Kelly's a guy that does change the picture, that he can go above and beyond, put pressure on the defense in different ways. So I'm totally with you there. So at this point in time, we're at Maxey, Embiid, Toby, Batum, and then Melton or Lowry for that fifth starter spot. Obviously, the second one essentially being the sixth man there. Kelly Oubre, the next man off the bench. We're already at 7 guys there. The backup center spot, Paul Reed. There's no doubt about it at this point. We fought this battle in years past. I think it's pretty clear that Paul Reed is the guy, and I think Nurse has officially came that realization as well. You think there's any chance that Nurse goes with Mo Bamba?
No, I know you brought that up last time, and I was like, no way. And then you kind of like made me nervous for a couple of minutes, but I think we've come back down to earth. I think that it's pretty clearly Paul. And they played together the other night, and they played together.
They did. Not quite intentionally, that it did seem like Paul was checking in for Joel. Joel waved him off, and he ended up taking Batum off the court. But you know what? We still saw it, so I'll still take it. And yeah, I do love it. He called a lob from Joel / missed shot, whatever you want to throw that in the category as. But all I know is if Nikola Jokic threw that shot / missed shot, that is everywhere all over the internet right now. So give the guys a little credit there. But yeah, I do feel a little bit better about the B-ball Paul conversation, especially since Joel's come back and it feels like that's pretty cemented. I do think Paul is a little bit of a coach killer, or a guy that just gets on coach's nerves. I think we're seeing that with example number 2 under Nick Nurse. But the bottom line is he does make a positive impact on winning. And that Spurs game, once again, I thought he was terrific on Wembanyama. And I know he fouled out, but like that's as difficult a matchup as it comes for anybody. And I thought Paul held up very well in that one. So definitely locking in Paul for the backup center. That brings us to 8 men in this rotation. And here's where it kind of gets interesting. Buddy Hield. What do we do with Buddy Hield here, James? Is he guaranteed to play in every game? Is he a guy that, will have his moments? What do you think his playoff role is for the Sixers team?
I think it's his like role to lose, if I had to put it that way. Like I think he's a guy that his skill set is necessary. Like and like I said earlier, like there's going to be games, hopefully, in theory, there should be games where he comes in and drills a bunch of shots, and against Miami when they play a zone, or against different matchups where they're really like doubling hard on Joel, where he's getting open shots. Like he's one of the best shooters that this league has seen over the last decade. Like he's the guy that should be in there to catch and shoot open jumpers. And in a playoff series, it's going to matter a lot. I think what I like about that ability is like, he's a guy that Nick Nurse has shown that he's like, if he's not making shots, he's not really helping us that much. So if he's not making shots, he's not going to be in. And that's fine. Like that's okay. You need a guy and the nice part about the Sixers, how they're currently constructed, is that they can actually withstand him not being on the court. Like where in years past, like you've had those guys on the court, even they're playing badly. So I think Hield has the ability to be really valuable to this team and spacing the floor and creating for, off of Maxey and Joel. But if he doesn't have it, I don't think that he's like a lock to stay in the lineup all the time, which like this is like the 8th, 9th, 10th guy is where you kind of get in the mix where I think it should be like strictly matchup based. Like, because KJ Martin, I think, has proved like he can play. He's not a guy that's like gonna be in the playoff rotation for sure. But like if they need him, like he can play. If you need Cameron Payne, God forbid you don't, but like he can play. Like, you know what I mean? Like you kind of get in that mode where it's like one of these guys can step up eventually, and hopefully Ricky Council as well.
Yeah, I don't think Buddy Hield cracks the every playoff game rotation. I really don't.
Mhm.
I don't think Nick Nurse particularly likes him. It's very clear that Nurse is like a defense first coach, and that's obviously brought him a ton of success. And that is the exact opposite of Buddy Hield, that he is not a guy who's going to shine on the defensive side of the floor. What's frustrated me the most about Buddy, for starters, like I wish we could bottle up and bring back that 4-game sample size when he first got to Philadelphia. Because he was incredible for those. He was taking guys off the dribble. He had 10 assists in a game. I don't know what happened to that version of him, but it has not been here since that point. What I've been most disappointed in, there's like zero pop in his game, that he's not capable of beating guys off the dribble. He doesn't create separations in his type of pin downs. And we've been pretty consistent on like what he truly will be judged on is when Joel Embiid returns to the floor.
Yeah.
And it hasn't looked overly promising, to be completely honest, that like we're not seeing any real 2-man action. They're not running the dribble handoffs. They're not doing any kind of it just like there isn't any semblance of like any of this JJ Redick, Seth Curry type actions that I was itching to see with him in there. So if that's not happening, you kind of like can't have him on the floor. And like he's still a very good shooter. He's still a guy that I have complete confidence in to hit open shots. And there's definitely like the Heat when they're throwing that crazy zone at you, that is a guy that could punish that. But I do think he's going to be a very matchup specific guy. And I'm honestly really disappointed in that, because I thought he could be a really positive and high impact player on this team.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think when we traded for him, it was like, oh shit, like this offense just got lethal. And you know, maybe it does take some time to build some of that rapport with Joel and with Tyrese and some of these other guys. But and sometimes, honestly, dude, it comes down to like shots falling. Like there's been a couple of these games where it's like he's got some open looks and the shots just didn't fall. And you live and die by that as a shooter. Like sometimes they just don't fall. And I think you know, to a degree, you trust him to make those shots because he's proven himself to be a good shooter. But, you know, I do also agree with you. It's like, if that's not falling, if he doesn't look, you know, like he's producing on offense, like defensively, he's just not there. He's not giving you a lot on that end. That like, I think he's a guy that's like, he's worth giving a chance every game, because if he gets hot, like he changes the game for you. But he's also a guy that should probably have a pretty short leash, considering like if he's not hitting shots, like he's got to come out.
And he's also, I'm having the same Seth Curry complaints, that he's not going to be a guy like his release is slower than I would like it to be. Yeah. And he's not going to take tough 3-pointers. He's only going to take the open shots. And like, dude, you're too good of a shooter for that to be the case. Yeah. That like the reason you're on the floor is as a floor spacer, as a 3-point shooter. Get him up. The team needs you to do that. And he really hasn't. So yeah, I'm putting Buddy firmly in that question mark category in here. So as we're at that, I would have Buddy as kind of my 9th man in this rotation. The next guy that I would bring up here is Ricky Council IV. Now, the Sixers have a decision to make here, because as things are currently constructed, he's still on a 2-way contract. He's yet to been upgraded to a standard NBA contract, and that would make him ineligible to play in the playoffs. That straight up can't happen. And to me, this conversation has shifted beyond just like you can maximize this team by getting him on a high value contract, locking him up for a couple years in the future and seeing what he develops into, to it's now like they very well may need him for stretches in this postseason. Like there have been matchups that he has changed the game for the Sixers team. This Spurs game I'll bring up once again. He did not play for the first 3 quarters of that game, was thrown in the fourth quarter, immediately changed the game, finished off the fourth quarter and played in both overtime periods straight through, had a crucial and one. He had an electric pass to Batum in the corner. That was such a big moment of the game. He's ready. He absolutely needs to see a contract. And I think he's a guy that like, I would even put a notch above Buddy Hield as far as his likelihood for playing on an everyday basis.
Yeah. I'd love to see him get that contract. I wonder, like, I do wonder if it's like coming from his camp. I wonder if like the Sixers are trying to like lowball him a little bit and like get him on that like really team friendly deal. And he's kind of like, maybe not him directly, but his camp is like, he deserves more. Like he'll get more in the off season. So we'll just wait. It would suck either way for that to come in between him being available for the playoffs. Although like I don't see Nurse like genuinely. I don't think I see Nurse like trusting him, to be completely honest, in like in a playoff game or in a playoff series. But he is one of those guys where it's like
he's put him in some big spots though. Like
yeah, he's also avoided him in some other games, and I guess that was a little bit earlier on. He's definitely proved like more recently that he's there, and I love him. Like, and he is one of those guys that like if the energy is never in question, the rebounding, the loose balls, the steals, the fast break dunks, the transition effort, like that stuff means a lot, even more in a playoff game, in a playoff series. So like just having that ability to bring him out and put him on the court in moments where it's like, this team looks like they're dragging a little bit. We need something. Ricky Council is kind of the answer in those moments. And just being able to look at the bench and see him in street clothes that would suck because, those are moments where he could come in and play. So for his sake and for him to get paid, for the Sixers' sake, and for them to be able to have him available, and for our sake to be able to watch him, it would be great for him to get a deal done so he's available to play.
Yeah, and for the Daryl Morey side of things here, I think he's keeping the card in his pocket that if he does not upgrade him, he'll be a restricted free agent this offseason, which puts the team in a massive power play situation where you just can match any contract that's thrown his way. I think Daryl likes that aspect of things. But again, like this is shifted in my mind to like they need him this year. And I can't imagine he's asking for anything like crazy to the point where like they can't match that. Like if you want like $8 million a year, like I'd be willing to step up to the plate. I'm confident enough to say like this guy's at least like a legitimate rotation player for the next couple of years. He's still super young. He's answered every question, every call, every opportunity that he's gotten. So I just would like to make that happen. And by the way, they still have an open roster spot. It's not even like you need to cut anybody. They're still carrying 14 guys. So very frustrated with that. And we'll be even more frustrated if we're still having this issue on Sunday and he can't play in the playoffs. You brought up KJ Martin there. Are you a KJ Martin guy?
Love him. I know he's not that good. I know he's not that good, but like I love him. I'm gonna be a sucker for a guy that can throw down a dunk. I think he's played really well. Like he's honestly like a better processor from the short roll than I realized, and he seems to be a guy like for a guy that's that young, like he's 24, 23, 24. Yeah. Like he knows his role really well. He doesn't seem to try to do a lot outside of his role. It would be great if he could shoot. We know how this story goes, but like it would be great if he could shoot, even just from the corner. And he's just like he's awkward in moments because like he's an undersized like 4 athletically that can hang as a 4, but like it's just basically the size of a shooting guard playing the 4. So like those guys get in like the tweeners are kind of tough, but like I like him. I think that he like again provides some additional hustle, good rebounder, and at least physically capable of being a good rebounder. When he wants to be like, there's a lot left to be desired from him, but I like the idea of KJ Martin for sure.
He's definitely grown on me throughout the year. He's a guy like I think him and Ricky Council are pretty similar as players at this point in time, and I think Ricky's kind of a step ahead in just about every area of basketball than KJ, which is why I kind of shift back to this conversation. I also think like KJ's a guy that like I think his pathway got messed up a little bit. That like to compare him to Ricky again, like Ricky's a guy who was like the 300 and something overall recruit, scrapped his way, spent 2 years at Wichita State, transferred to Arkansas, went undrafted. Then you look at KJ Martin, that he's a guy that went directly from high school to, I think he played either at G League Ignite or I don't think it was Ignite. It was one of the showcase teams that he played for. He didn't play any college ball, went through kind of those processes and then spent a year in the G League. Like, I think he would have been a guy that benefited of like being a guy on a basketball team that was capable of like playing through his mistakes. And I don't think he's really got the stage to do that. And the Sixers team certainly is not one that is the case. I know he played for the Rockets and kind of had a chance to do that early on. I like KJ. I don't really want to see him in a playoff rotation kind of at all. There might be one specific matchup where we see him for a couple minutes. And I agree that he's grown on me, but I'm surprised to see how optimistic you are on him.
Yeah. It's more of like the hypothetical positivity for him. It's like I like the idea of KJ and what he brings, and a guy that can get up and down on the break and defend at the rim a little bit and kind of do everything. Also, like left-handed is always like a plus, and just like aesthetically watching them. So even though his jumper is broken, but like it's really not like I don't need to see him on a nightly basis. There was a point in time where I was like, I don't know if I need to see him at all. But in these moments where he does get a chance to play, I feel like I just root for him very heavily. I think like he's a fun guy to root for.
Yeah, that's all fair. And speaking of left-handed, Cameron Payne. Cam Payne has been far better than I expected, to be perfectly honest. I've liked him on this team far more than I expected to be the case. Do you think there's any world where he plays in the playoffs?
Probably not. But another guy, like I get in these moments where like I'm so anti one thing that I become a fan of like the opposition. So like I got frustrated with the way that the Sixers fans and just like in general reacted to that trade Like people overvalued Patrick Beverley like to the umpteenth degree. And like, so now I become a Cameron Payne guy because like, I think he's better than Pat Bev right now. And like,
I disagree there still.
I'm not going to back down from that hill just because I don't want to. I'm
sure
if we want to go into it, you're probably right. But like, just to stay firm in my stance, like Cameron Payne provides legitimate 3-point scoring. He handles the ball well. He does all like the little things well. He's like a pro guard. You know what I mean? The jumper is whack.
Yeah.
But like it goes in. I kind of just like he's a goofy, like weird little guy. I kind of like him a lot.
I don't mind having him on the team, but he also shoots the ball like a toddler and can't defend a single player in the NBA.
Goes 40% though. Like
yeah, for sure.
40% clip, man. You can't argue it, you know?
And we don't have to dig in on the Pat Bev debate, but this is the same Pat Bev that just had 20 and 10 as a starting guard for the Bucks in a must-win game, more from the Sixers' perspective than anything yesterday. I do think like my debate here was never like Cam Payne is an innings eater that you need to go out there and play. You can make that argument that he's better than Pat Bev for actually playing in a playoff rotation. I do think Pat Bev is a plus asset and Cam Payne is not. But really the bigger question or the bigger like layout here is Kyle Lowry's on this team. And that's kind of the true Pat Bev replacement there. So we don't got to dig in too deep there. Is there, I guess, Covington, if he's healthy, I think absolutely should be in this rotation. Do you agree there?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's like body type, defensive minded. Like he deserves, like he would be necessary for sure, especially at specific moments. I think that he would definitely be in that.
So we have, as this rotation, we got Maxey, Embiid, Toby, Melton, Batum as our starters, Lowry, Oubre, B-Ball, Paul, and a little asterisk next to Cove. So really still going 8 deep, which I'm kind of surprised to be landing on that. I put question marks next to Buddy, Ricky, and nose next to KJ and Cam Payne. Is there anyone else you want to throw in the mix?
No. No.
Yeah,
I mean, that list
Jeff Doughton love?
Say it again.
No Jeff Doughton love?
I like him too. Like he's kind of like he just does a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't do too much. He's kind of just solid.
I like him as well. If I asked you how old he is, what would you say?
40. He looks 40. How old is he? I mean, I know he's not as young as we think. Like he's been in the league for like a minute.
27. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that kind of like I maybe thought he was like 25. So like, it's like a little bit older than I expected, but I knew that he was not like a spring chicken. I knew that he was not like a super young guy.
Yeah, but I do like having him on this team. He's a capable ball handler, a guy that can step in. So yeah, I think I'm pretty good with all that. So there are 2 more games left in this Sixer season against the Magic tomorrow, which will be a big one in terms of seeding, and then finish it off Sunday against the Brooklyn Nets. Every single team in the NBA plays on Sunday, so could be a lot of moving parts going on. Any final thoughts on all that?
No, man. I think like just the way this team is looking, the way it's kind of played out is like I'm really confident. I feel good about this team. I'm excited for them to go into this. And I think like something we didn't touch on at all for a playoff series is like Nick Nurse is here. And I think that this is going to be where we really evaluate him and what he is as a coach. I think this next stretch of time is where he shows the difference in him and Doc Rivers and Brett Brown and the guys we've seen before. I think Nick Nurse is worlds above there. So hopefully that's something that we get to see exemplified over the next couple of weeks.
Totally agree there. And yeah, let's hope this team takes care of business. You focus on you, let the chips fall as they will around you, and then let's brace up, go to battle against whatever that matchup will be. So appreciate all you guys for tuning into this episode. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video. We'll be talking with you next time right here on Pick Swap Media.